Hello, my name is Home/Henry. I'm an official caster for the Pokemon Go Championship Series, and today I'm going to be showcasing footage from a battler whose peak career high in ELO is 2699. So they have never been able to make it through Veteran and all the way to Expert. Today, we'll be doing a VOD review, going through 2 submitted sets of theirs from the Go Battle League to point out the good things that they're doing, but also to identify the things that they can improve on and common pitfalls that trap battlers in Veteran and prevent them from climbing. As I mentioned, we'll be going through 2 sets. These battles take place in the Open Great League, and it features a pretty strong meta team with the Shadow Kanto Marowak, Dugong, and Drifblim. So, without further ado, let's take a look at these battles. The lead in game number 1 is going to be a non-Shadow Quagsire, and this is a tricky Pokemon for this team to deal with. Quagsire, of course, has Aqua Tail, which does hit Marowak for super effective damage, and its coverage move Stone Edge hits both the Dugong and the Drifblim for super effective. Without even starting the battle, how I would approach this, well, there's a couple ways you can look at it. Marowak does win the 2-shield versus non-Shadow Quagsire, so you can potentially stay in, try and play out the 2-shield and go from there. Another option is throwing 4 Mud Slaps, waiting a turn, and trying to catch an Aqua Tail onto Dugong. This way, you're taking advantage of the fact that your opponent's first available time to throw on good charge attack timing is going to be on their 7th Mud Shot, because they have the 2-turn move, we have the 3-turn move, so they're going to be wanting to throw on their 1st, 4th, or 7th Mud Shot. On Mud Shots 1 and 4, they don't have the move yet, as it's 5 to the 1st, so that is one potential option. I'm curious to see how our battler does decide to play this out. So we do have the Marowak against the Quagsire, choosing to stay in for now. Will we see the wait? We do not know. Instead, choosing to stay in and letting the first move through. Aqua Tail is going to hit for super effective damage, but Mud Shot really does not add up in this matchup, so now you can pretty safely go for 1 and a Bone Club, and that's exactly what our battler is going to do. Now this damage will not be lethal, but it will do a significant amount to the opponent. The opponent is going to let it go, and now we see the waiting of the turn and a catch onto Dugong. That's a really nice play from our battler here, saving energy on the Marowak, wasting the opponent's energy, and now the opponent will send out Morpeko, and this is very bad. Morpeko in the back is going to be a problem. The opponent is going to throw the Ore Wheel on 6, which is on alignment. I don't mind a shield here. As the Dugong, you're always going to be Icy Winding because it's a guaranteed shield from the opponent. So your goal is basically just to try and soften up the Morpeko for an easier Mud Slap down later on. But the issue that you're going to have in this moment is the fact that Morpeko has way faster pacing than the Dugong. So the Morpeko can always just overfarm, play to the CMP tide that it knows it's going to win, and have residual energy to threaten the Marowak as well. They will go for the now Dark type Aura Wheel that will pick up the knockout. Morpeko back into the full belly form. Marowak unable to get that farm down and now is forced to burn a shield. I'm going to pause this here because at this level I do imagine our battlers are counting. I think I honestly would have preferred the decision to, because they had the move, they could have Bone Clubbed here. Bone Club would have potentially just knocked them out or grabbed the final shield. I get the idea of wanting to save the energy, but at this point you're going to be very low and debuffed, and you're going to need to switch out. So I think I would have preferred the throwing of the Bone Club there, since unfortunately Marowak was not going to make that farm down. But instead, we see our battler forced to now shield to protect this energy. This is going to be the Psychic Fangs, so unfortunately they're going to be debuffed on their defense. They're very low, and this just puts them in a difficult position. In comes the Quagsire, could have farmed down there. Unfortunately, I will actually go back here, but could have farmed down because the Quagsire is in a range where 3 Mud Slaps will KO, and they are 4 off their move. So unless they get what's called the damage registration error / new mechanic, the opponent would not actually get their next move. So potentially your options here are, if you think you can farm down, you commit to it, or you can switch into Drifblim instantly. But this in-between play, unfortunately, because Switch takes a turn, means that the opponent does actually get an Aqua Tail into the Drifblim. So instead of just fully getting that farm down because of the switch, they get an Aqua Tail, and now you have all this energy on your Marowak, but the opponent has a shield to hide behind, and on top of that, they will, as we see Typhlosion in the back, so this game's going to be over, but they have a shield to hide behind, and they have an ability, if they need to overfarm and play to the cap tie, to where even if it's something that Marowak wins in terms of cap, then it's just going to be over. Whereas here, one Incinerate is going to KO, which means that's just going to be game over. I think this game was always going to be a very difficult one to win, as the opponent, of course, is very weak in the back to the Marowak, but the Marowak was always very, very low, and that made life quite difficult for it. I think potentially throwing moves a little earlier in that match could have made things slightly better, as if you still had a shield in that endgame, like let's say hypothetically, through the Bone Club, KO'd Morpeko, so that way you're not in a situation where you have to worry about being debuffed, and then the opponent sends in the Quagsire, you commit to the farm down, you farm that down as well, you leave with a Bone Club, and you have an ability to grab a shield from the opponent, and then you can look to switch into the Drifblim. It's still going to be a difficult game, but I think it's a lot closer to potentially being winnable with a cleaner play pattern. We now move into match number 2, leading the Shadow Marowak into Azumarill. Azumarill, as I will pause here for a second, a bit of a core breaker for this team. The Shadow Marowak is able to 2-shield its way through it. It does just straight up win the 2-shield as long as you have a decent ranked Shadow Marowak, but in doing so, you're very much relying on your opponent to shield back. If your opponent just lets it go, then your opponent can honestly take a 2-0 shield advantage, and that's going to be a bit tough to try and overcome. So a lot of the times here, especially considering that you don't really want to take the damage on the Marowak, you don't really want to take damage on the Drifblim, you have a couple options. One is you can try and go for an Ice Beam catch onto Dewgong, but of course that will rely on a successful prediction of when they're going to throw. Or another option is you could just look to switch into the Dewgong instantly, as if you switch in instantly, then you will make the drill run, even with being one turn behind since you swapped before they make the play rough. So let's see how our battler decides to play this out. It looks like they're going to stay in to start with here, farming up quite a bit of energy. And do we see a catch attempt at any point? No. Builds up to the back-to-back Bone Clubs, and we don't see a bubble go through, which means this is a CMP tie. The opponent has clicked their Ice Beam, and this means that our battler is going to be forced to commit a shield. The tricky position that the Marowak is in is 3 more Mud Slaps plus a Bone Club do not KO Azumarill. So you can't really stay in and throw your move, as your opponent can just let it go, and that's the exact scenario we talked about, where they're able to take that 2-0 shield advantage, and whatever they have in back is suddenly very threatening, even if it's at a type disadvantage. One potential play you could go for here is 3 Mud Slaps and a catch attempt onto the Dewgong, so that way you're able to preserve energy for later. The opponent is going to go for the Ice Beam, and I think that's the play pattern I would prefer at this point, is just do 3 and then a switch out. We will actually see the Bone Club thrown. Again, this does not do enough to knock out. The opponent can very comfortably let this go. We will see the switch into the Dewgong, an attempt at a catch, but the opponent holds on to their energy, and now they're going to send out Galarian Corsola. This is going to be a tricky game. Galarian Corsola is very strong into this line as a whole. Dewgong with the energy advantage, able to apply an early Icy Wind debuff, but even if you're able to apply those debuffs, Corsola has very good pacing, and it's able to spam out these power gems. So Corsola, they have no reason to bait here. Oh, they're actually on Rock Blast. So this is a trainer who is just, my guess is they built it recently and they just haven't TM'd it yet, but every Galarian Corsola should be and will be on Nightshade and Power Gem. Power Gem, a significantly better move than Rock Blast, as Power Gem would actually be able to two-shot the Dewgong, whereas Rock Blast is a deeply terrible move, and the Dewgong, I think, will actually be able to Ice Shard down here. So in this instance, our battler does get lucky because our opponent is using an incorrect move set, and Dewgong is actually able to beat Corsola, something that will not happen under normal circumstances. In comes the Azumarill, the bubble goes through, so they did not trigger a CMP tie. Firing off the Drill Run is going to connect. Azumarill loses a ton of energy. In the back is Annihilate. And Annihilate is just going to be met with the Drifblim, and this is very much just game over. As we rewind here a little bit, when you see the typing, because you will get to see the typing before the Mon switches in, we see our battler is clicking actually doubly on the screen, trying to get this fast move through. At this health range, unless your opponent is sending something in that has a 3-turn fast move, your fast move damage is not going to register, because if they have a 2-turn or a 1-turn, you're just going to get farmed down before your move lands. So a play that I would have liked to see in this moment is not tapping. Looking at, hold on, I may actually have to adjust this slightly. One moment here. There we go. Okay. I will adjust it slightly so we can see what I'm talking about. But here, and I'm just going to rewind to this, and then I will pause it at the important moment. So the drill run is going to connect right here. Before we even see Annihilate, that typing is in the top right. So you're able to take this information before you even see the Mon to say, I can't get a fast move. You could just insta-switch into the Drifblim and you'll be in a pretty good position. Granted, this is not a play that's required to win the game, but it is something that would definitely make this game just a little bit cleaner. And now we can unpause and play out the rest of the game, and it's going to be a very straightforward one of Drifblim just fully farming down the Shadow Annihilate. There's just nothing Shadow Annihilate can do at this moment, as Annihilate realizes there's just no hope, and they get fully farmed. We now move into game number 3. Shadow Marowak into Shadow Feraligatr. This is a great lead because this is the beginning of the match, so all shields are up in this moment. And Shadow Marowak cleanly wins the 2-shield versus Shadow Feraligatr. How does it do it? It just farms it down. That's how good Mud Slap is. So, as we play this out, I wouldn't be surprised to see the opponent switch out of this matchup at some point. So Marowak is just going to start absolutely chipping away. Here the opponent is going to make a pretty significant misplay. They throw after 5 Shadow Claws, and one thing that you're going to notice is the Marowak is going to get 2 free turns as a result of it. So the Marowak is right here on turn 1 of their Mud Slap as this move is thrown, so they get 2 free turns. Whereas if the opponent had thrown 2 more Shadow Claws and thrown on 7, then they would have only given 1 free turn. The opponent is going to save switch into Dunsparce, and this is a problem. Dunsparce does great into this backline, so as Marowak, honestly, you are now in an overload situation. Your opponent is very, very weak to the Marowak, but your Marowak might struggle to fully 1v3, so this will be a little bit tricky. Marowak can, of course, survive the drill run. The opponent is 1 off, so as the Marowak, you can potentially go for 1 Mud Slap and the Bone Club on the CMP tie. Our trainer is actually going to go for a catch. This is an interesting play pattern. Catching the drill run, this play pattern will work if Dugong is able to Ice Shard down. If Dugong fails the Ice Shard down, then this potentially could be catastrophic. Dugong is going to go for it, and it looks like Dugong will get the Ice Shard down. So this switch out and the catch of the drill run ends up being a pretty nice play for our battler, as 3 Ice Shards will KO. The opponent gets so close to another move, but they do not get there. And now the opponent has to decide, what are they sending in here? Is it the final Pokemon, or is it going to be the Feraligatr? They send in the Feraligatr. Dugong is at the back-to-back drill runs, and this feels pretty safe. You can fire off the back-to-back moves, and then look to go for a combo play. We're actually going to see a switch out here. Feraligatr is able to save itself, and in the back is Clodsire. I do think the cleaner play pattern here would have been to go for the double drill run, and if they shielded, then combo with the energy on the Marowak. Because now you have a Feraligatr that does have energy. It's very close to a move, so things could get a little bit uncomfortable in this endgame. You have a ton of energy against the Clodsire. So because it's Clodsire, this game still probably going to be a win, because Clodsire trying to Poison Sting down a Kanto Marowak is nearly impossible. But I think the cleaner play pattern would have been to throw the second move on the Dugong, and then either you get the KO and then you just have Marowak versus the world, or if you don't get the KO, then, I mean, you can just combo and throw your move with the Marowak, since if you didn't get the knockout, they would have had to burn a shield. The opponent forced to burn both shields now. The Marowak, again, just cannot be farmed down, so you can just let this go. And you still have the move stored on the Dugong, so you can just go for a full Astonish farm down with the Drifblim, and this game will be over. The opponent actually goes for an undercharged Stone Edge, so that's going to allow him to actually go for a combo play here with the Dugong. Dugong Drill Run KOs, and the opponent, they do get the move on for Alligator, but they still haven't seen the Drifblim, so there's no point in them even throwing it. Let's move into match number 4 of set 1, Shadow Marowak versus Dugong. So right off the bat, terrible lead. This team is ABA weak to Dugong. Both the Marowak and the Drifblim will be taking super effective damage. Personally, how I would probably play this out is I'd stay in to start with the Marowak, probably build up to the Rock Slide, bait with the Bone Club, and then try and catch the second Icy Wind onto my own Dugong. That way I can preserve energy and undo the Icy Wind debuff that they applied. So let's see how our battler does decide to play this out, but this is definitely going to be an uphill battle. Choosing to throw 3 and then a switch out into the Dugong. Opponent is going to send in Dunsparce. The opponent clearly has zero fear of a counter user whatsoever. Any one Annihilate would just completely sweep them, but now, honestly, I think banking energy on the Marowak is good, but the issue you're going to have is that Dugong still is going to have a lot of shields to hide behind. And also, it is a bit funny to have the massive Icy Wind animation pause there, so I can unpause. But you're now in a type negative matchup. The Dugong has energy, and the Dugong has 2 shields to hide behind. So we haven't really generated an advantage out of this mid-game situation. Instead, we're still in a very difficult position. They get to fire off a Rock Slide. It's debuffed, so it will not knock out, but it will inflict quite a lot of damage. So now the Dugong will get farmed down. The switch timer is not going to come up, so forced to throw an Icy Wind. Throwing it earlier may have meant reaching a second Icy Wind. It would have been close, but reducing the rollout damage, there may have been a chance. We now see the switch into the Marowak getting a catch. So this catch is good, but again, the uncomfortable thing is that Dugong has energy, so they can just switch back into the Dugong instantly, fires off the Bone Club as they do go for the Ice Shard. If the opponent's counting, they know this is not enough for a Rock Slide, and they can let it go, and they were. So they are able to let that through. Now they go for the Icy Wind, and again, this is a very difficult position. You find yourself shielding in a matchup with the Marowak, but the Marowak, this is a losing battle. Unless the opponent plays to a very bad CMP tie, which it looks like they just did, then I don't really see a path forward in the game. But the opponent now actually makes a pretty severe misplay. As the opponent, there's no reason to throw instantly if your plan is to use a shield anyway, because you know the Marowak's going to win the CMP tie, so what's the harm in not throwing your energy instantly, in over-farming quite a bit, throwing right before Marowak gets to its second move, and then you have energy for the backline. Because now our battler is just going to let the Marowak go and try and sweep with Drifblim, because the Dugong does not have any residual energy. So this is a grave error by the opponent that actually lets our battler back in the game. Our battler sends in Dugong, and that's unfortunately a pretty significant misplay. Even if you can make that move with the Dugong, you need to preserve that Dugong because it's your only ability to undo and reset an Icy Wind debuff for the remainder of this game. Whereas now, look at this, the Dugong makes the Icy Wind. Not only is it super effective damage, but you have no ability to catch anymore, and you have no ability to reset a debuff. So this game, barring something incredibly weak in the back, should basically be over. It's Superior. Even that, Superior will be able to win this game just because The Drifblim's debuffed. It doesn't have the same damage output that it typically would. The Aerial Ace is going to land. We are going to see an Icy Wind connect, but since it's a debuffed Icy Wind, Superior does not care about this damage whatsoever. And Superior will very comfortably be able to fire off a Frenzy Plant and take this win. The opponent did actually end up committing the shield, and we see a back-breaking catch. And unfortunately, that's why it is important to try and throw on good timing. Because if you throw, let's say, one in the move, they're going to be in the middle of their fast attack. So if you click it right here, like the first one, they're in the middle of their fast attack. They're not able to catch. You cannot switch in the middle of a fast attack. But on this second move that's thrown, it's 2 Astonishes, so it's at the end, and that allows the catch. Even without the catch, this game would have been a loss, because even though you have the type advantage matchup in the back, unfortunately, you just don't have an ability to win because your damage output was so dramatically reduced by that opposing Icy Wind. We now move to battle number 5 of set 1, and it's a bad lead. Shadow Marowak against Mandibuzz. This team is ABA weak to Mandibuzz, meaning that both the Marowak and the Drifblim lose against Mandibuzz. However, this is what I would call a soft ABA team, where the Marowak and Drifblim, they're losing matchups, but they can fight back. Rock Slide from the Marowak, Icy Wind from the Drifblim, both hit for super effective damage. So typically, I would like to play it how this battler's doing it. You want to get some chip damage on it, make it a bit easier for later, and then look to switch in your only counter. In comes Dugong. Opponent is going to switch into Wigglytuff. This is incredible to bait out. Drifblim does not want to see this, and you want to Icy Wind instantly. Charm, the whole thing that makes Charm good is the fast move pressure. So the earlier you apply the Icy Wind debuff, the better off you're going to be. Overfarming does you nothing against fast move pressure mons. Wigglytuff is going to be spamming out Swifts in this matchup. Swift, not a particularly threatening attack, especially when debuffed, so I really like the decision to no shield. Now, you can potentially go for Icy Wind if you want extra farm in exchange for less health, or you can go for Drill Run if you want the higher damage. At this point, with the amount of Ice Shards done, Icy Wind will be lethal, so Icy Wind will be the correct move to go for. Icy Wind is going to not pick up the knockout. The opponent is shielding that Wigglytuff. At -2, it's going to be close. I think the Swift still KOs, but it's going to be very, very close. I wouldn't mind banking this energy and switching, and that's exactly what our battler is going to do. Out comes the Mandibuzz, but it's met with the energy. This so far is a well-executed ABA-style team from our battler. They are playing this well. Rock Slide connects. That's going to get the Mandibuzz low. It's a CMP tie, and you can just let the Marowak go. This could potentially set up an aggressive Astonish farm down. That could be a very interesting play. I think I would actually like to see that play out, because you could send in the Dugong to Ice Shard down, but an aggressive Astonish down, and there it is. This battler sees the vision that they can shield. Oh, they actually no shield here. That's a pretty massive surprise. They no shield. The Dark Pulse does so much damage. I would have liked to see a shield and a farm down personally, because then you leave very healthy with an ability to debuff opponents. Whereas now, this is going to be tricky. Drapion, of course, a bad matchup for Drifblim. The opponent can probably just spam out Aqua Tails. It is going to be the non-Shadow Drapion as well. Drapion will go for a move, and you're in a situation where you just have to shield this. There's no other option. The opponent goes for a Crunch. They should just be Aqua Tailing here, and now you can go for another Icy Wind. The opponent will never shield this because they know that there's a move stored on the Dugong. So the opponent just will never shield this, and the game's over, except the opponent makes a game-losing misplay there. Oh my goodness. As the opponent, and it's something that we're seeing quite a bit in these first few battles in the veteran rank, is people will make a lot of misplays because these are battlers who are working to improve. They are striving to get to that expert rank, but they're battlers who will make misplays. And in this instance, this game right here is completely the moment the Drapion enters the field. The game is what I would call completely over. The only win con is if the opponent has no understanding of the endgame scenario and how to win the game. And luckily enough for our battler, that's exactly what happens. Icy Wind does not do nearly enough damage for it to be considered threatening here. Icy Wind will get the Drapion into the red, but it's going to do, of course, way less than a Drill Run. So that's the move you have to no-shield as the opponent. And if the opponent no-shields the Icy Wind, they just simply win the game. However, they make the misplay. They shield, they get sniped with the Drill Run, so it's well executed by Fly in this endgame, capitalizing on the opponent's misplay, as the Drill Run is going to KO. In comes the Wigglytuff. Wigglytuff is going to get farmed down, but for the opponent, that's a completely winning game that they let slip through their fingertips. But for the opponent, that's a completely winning game that they let slip through their fingertips. We now move to set number 2. We've got battle number 1, and wow, that's a very familiar lead. The Shadow Marowak into the Mandibuzz. Same principles are going to apply as the previous game. You're just going to want to play this out for a while and then look to safe switch into the Dugong eventually after softening it up with a Rock Slide, because once a Rock Slide lands, it's basically in a range. This is actually a foul play Mandibuzz. Very interesting. Dark Pulse, definitely what I prefer to use, as it does have that little bit of extra damage. But in this instance, you just want to soften up the Mandibuzz. So if they shield, you're fine staying in and shielding back. But if they no shield, you're okay safe switching into the Dugong. Opponent is going to send out Ferrothorn. Ferrothorn will barely be outpaced here. That's nice for the Dugong. Typically, Dugong does not have an ability to flip this matchup. However, that's not necessarily the goal. Flipping it doesn't have as much value in this moment as potentially setting up a farm for one of your other Pokemon. So here I'm fully expecting to see a no shield and just clicking of the Icy Wind instantly. Drill Run, of course, does do more damage, so it's also an option, but the Icy Wind will make it so that any energy they throw outside of this matchup is going to be 2 stages debuffed, so it's going to be way less threatening than it typically would. We see an undercharge and a shield. That's an interesting shield from the opponent, as a move there does not knock out and doesn't really put them in farm down range either. They are going to overfarm massively, and I like just letting the Dugong go, and now you can try and go for farm on one of your other Pokemon. You could potentially go for farm with the Drifblim. Drifblim, of course, Thunder would add up, but the Thunder is 2 stages debuffed, so it's not nearly as threatening as it typically would be. They're actually on Mirror Shot on the Ferrothorn. There's a switch into the Mandibuzz, and now here is where you're using your shields. You need to protect this Drifblim. Drifblim can provide very nice value with these Icy Winds against the Mandibuzz, and we will see the Icy Wind fired by the Drifblim. And this won't quite knock out the Mandibuzz, but it will be getting the Mandibuzz low. So the Icy Wind is going to connect. Mandibuzz will hang on. That's going to be a CMP tie. And now that they're debuffed, you could consider letting it go and farming down. The difference between the last game and this one, of course, is the fact that a debuff has already been applied. So now we will see Drifblim getting that Astonish farm down. The Ferrothorn still does have some energy and has undone the debuffs that it had from earlier. Now we see a Clodsire enter the field of play. Nice charge attack timing, throwing 3 and the move, and going for the Icy Wind. But things are honestly in a tremendous position for our battler at this point of the match. They can fire off energy with the Clodsire, and they're going to do that. The perfect overfarm by the opponent, but they're forced to throw a lot of energy. Clodsire does not have cheap charge moves. They go for the Stone Edge. That is going to pick up the knockout. In comes the Marowak, and for Marowak, the biggest thing you need is energy, and that's what our battler understands here. Throwing a move into the Clodsire and could potentially be catastrophic, but if you always have energy loaded, then they can never bring in the Ferrothorn, because if they bring in the Ferrothorn, they're immediately going to get KO'd by a Bone Club. Honestly, I would just wait the turn, and they do. They wait the turn, anticipate the switch in of the Ferrothorn, and now get to fire off the 2 Bone Clubs. That's a very well executed endgame by our battler. Understanding that energy on Marowak is how you win this game. This game is so losable if you potentially throw a move earlier and then you don't have the energy to defeat the Ferrothorn. But now Clodsire just gets farmed down, and that's a very well played game. We now move into battle number 2 of set number 2, and this is a great lead, Shadow Marowak against Ariados. Shadow Marowak should win all even shield scenarios versus Ariados. Ariados throws on 5, again a misplay from the opponent that is going to cost 2 free turns of energy to the Marowak. Now, how Marowak wins all evens is by doing what our battler does here, no shielding the first move. Even if it's a super effective Trailblaze and their attack is boosted, the Marowak's a ground type and it's a poison type fast move. Even with all the boosts in the world, you're not poison stinging down a Marowak. So Marowak is going to no shield, and then Marowak actually decides to go for a bait. I think I would have preferred the Rock Slide Full Send here, just because if they debuffed, I think they're more likely to let it go. They do let it go, but this should still be fine, as long as you don't throw the Bone Club on the Captai, which is a losing Captai for Marowak, then you can just farm down, you'll have a bunch of energy, and you will be able to reset that debuff and switch out later on. And now we see a creative way of resetting the debuff, switching in the Dugong, sniping down the Ariados. Opponent sends out more Pekko. They should have brought this in instantly, because now they're getting outpaced by Dugong, and Dugong will be able to debuff them and grab a shield with an Icy Wind. So the opponent, they didn't have good reaction time, and it cost them quite significantly. Now they can overfarm massively though. Oh, that's a big misplay from the opponent. The Dugong here is energy dry. There's no reason that Morpeko cannot farm up to the back-to-back Aura Wheels before throwing. Because even if you're at -1, the first Aura Wheel you throw is going to make it so your attack's back to normal, and then you have a Dark type Aura Wheel which you can throw immediately into the Marowak to force the Marowak's final shield. So this is a huge error from the opponent, and one that our battler can take advantage of. They should always farm up to 2 before throwing, because they have the ability to. Why would you not farm up in a situation where you have only Ice Shards hitting you, and instead try and get energy when Mud Slaps are hitting you? It just doesn't make any sense. The opponent's play here is honestly probably going to cost them quite severely. Aura Wheel lands, the Dugong survives it, they're going to get 2 boosted Thunder Shocks, but that's 2 boosted Thunder Shocks when they could have farmed up way more and then thrown later. Now they don't have a Dark type Aura Wheel, which means that our battler can bring in the Marowak, click Bone Club, and force the shield from the opponent. Whereas the opponent, had they banked back to back, could have thrown first and been the aggressor in that matchup, being the one to force the shield rather than having to give up the final shield themselves. Ooh, that's another really poor misplay from the opponent here. The opponent throws on alignment, giving Marowak an entire free Mud Slap. That's 10 free energy to the Marowak. And now, I mean, they're probably going to have to switch out. They're not making another move. They are going to switch out into Diggersby. Marowak is going to bank a ton of energy, banking back-to-back Bone Clubs and sending in this Drifblim. One thing to worry about in this endgame, Morpeko wins the CMP tie over Marowak. So if there's ever a situation where Morpeko is able to farm up to a Psychic Fangs, you can't bring in the Marowak, because the Marowak would lose the cap tie. So that's something our battler is going to have to be very, very cautious of. If I'm this battler, I'm overfarming as much as I can before Icy Winding, so throwing right here. And that's where a battler does, throwing 3 in the move, because you always want residual energy in case the Morpeko re-enters the field of play. The timers were desynced, so the opponent can switch now. They decide not to. They are going to fire off the Fire Punch, and I wouldn't be surprised if the opponent switches in here, as their clock will be available. The Fire Punch lands. There's the switch into Morpeko. And because the opponent didn't wait for the Icy Wind to be thrown onto the Diggersby, now they just get KO'd. And that was their only chance of winning the game. So the opponent, honestly, had the favorable team composition here. The opponent, in my view, was in the driver's seat throughout, but this is a great example of how many misplays layered on top of each other can turn a winning game into a losing one, as the opponent very much was in control. They had a Morpeko with an ability to farm up a massive amount of energy, pressure everything, but they honestly did not do a good job of over farming, and that ends up costing them massively throughout the course of this game. We now move to Battle 3 of set number 2, and a Shadow Marowak versus Diggersby. This is a winning matchup for the Shadow Marowak. So as the Shadow Marowak, you're very fine staying in here and playing this out. You could also look to switch out of this matchup, as you do have 2 better answers in the back. So I definitely don't mind the pivot out into the Dugong. The opponent stays to throw energy, which is a pretty big surprise. If you see Diggersby, the most common core pairing with it is Toxapex, but there's probably going to be poison types in the back, so banking energy on Marowak probably going to work out in this game. I like that play pattern, and we actually do see a shield here from the Dugong. Honestly, I would have liked to see a no shield from the Dugong personally, just because you know a Scorching Sands is not going to do a ton of damage. And now you're in a situation where your opponent has brought in an Azumarill, which is a problem Pokemon for this team. Your opponent got lucky, they got a 30% chance at an attack debuff. You have energy, but you're debuffed, you're down a shield, and things are looking very, very difficult. You're going to see an Icy Wind thrown first. I like this play. The opponent just switch locked themselves, lower the amount of damage they're able to do for you, or do to you for the next 50 seconds until the switch timer will be available. We actually see a double Icy Wind by the Dugong. So Dugong not going for damage here, rather instead just trying to limit the amount of damage this Azumarill can do. And honestly, I don't mind that considering that the Dugong is debuffed. And now this Play Rough is going to do an absolutely laughable amount of damage against the Dugong. So they will go for the Play Rough. And look at that. That just does nothing. That is just a very ineffective move. Dugong farming up a ton of energy. The opponent can honestly farm a lot. I'm surprised they cap tied here. I was going to say because in this instance, the Dugong is going to reach 100 energy before the opponent will. So if you're the opponent, it makes sense to try and farm up all your energy, let the Dugong throw, save your energy, and try and switch out. So this is a situation where the opponent is making a misplay. They're going to use their energy in an inefficient manner, which is when they're double debuffed. The Dugong has to throw before the Azumarill because the Dugong had more residual energy. So this is just a pretty big misplay by the opponent and one that's going to help our battler quite significantly. Drill Run, it's debuffed. It's not going to do a lot of damage, but the absolute killer for the opponent is the fact that they're throwing double debuffed energy here. This Play Rough not going to do much. I wouldn't mind seeing an aggressive pivot out from our battler here, and there it is right on cue. In comes the Marowak. These bubbles not doing much of anything, and you can just let this go because again they're throwing energy when it's double debuffed. So this Ice Beam is not threatening. The Marowak tanks that very comfortably, and now Marowak will fire off the Bone Club at the Azumarill, just trying to remove it from the field of play. We actually see, looks like an undercharge here. I don't love the undercharge because the battler could just switch out and they will. It looked like they were swiping at the top of the screen, so I don't know if that was just an issue with the phone touchscreen or if that was intentional, but usually I don't like undercharging if my opponent has an ability to switch out, because of course if they can switch out, then I don't really get the same advantage as I do from undercharging when they're switch locked in. The opponent goes for a Fire Punch that will not knock out, but the Quick Attack after will. You still do have Dugong available, but now in comes Drifblim to try and slow the roll of this Diggersby. Diggersby will be spamming out Fire Punches. Fire Punch is going to connect onto the Drifblim. Drifblim is going to get outpaced here. Diggersby will be able to make another Fire Punch before the Icy Wind is reached, but again, that's not a particularly threatening move. However, because the move was undercharged earlier, there's still a bit of Azumarill that you're going to have to farm down at some point later on, or they could potentially try to catch on. So we will see the Icy Wind, and there it is. I spoke it into existence. And that's why undercharging when your opponent can switch out can come back to bite you, because now they're able to get a catch. Drifblim will get an Astonish down. We will see a switch into the Dugong. So there's energy banked everywhere, but man, that is unfortunate. And what do you know? It's going to be the Toxapex in the back. Toxapex will be met with double Drill Runs from the Dugong, but 2 Drill Runs do not KO Toxapex from a Dugong. These are moves that it will be able to survive. Like, the damage does definitely add up, but it's not a move that's particularly threatening to the opponent. Drill Run number 2 launched at the Toxapex. Toxapex is going to let that go, fully farmed down, and the Toxapex can now threaten KOs with Brines, which is very unfortunate, as Brine will just about knock out here. The opponent, they still of course have their Diggersby as well. So at this point, our battler realizes that this game is in fact over, and Toxapex is just going to get that full farm down. We now move to battle number 4 of set 2, and it's the Dream Lead Shadow Marowak versus Clodsire. This entire team does great into the Clodsire. We see a safe switch to Shadow Primeape. Could have potentially looked to switch instantly into Drifblim. Now that you're still in this matchup, things get a little bit uncomfortable. For example, if they have Ice Punch, and they land it here and they have the energy for it, things could get very tricky very fast. But our battler is going to call that is not going to be the Ice Punch. It will be the Rage Fist, and now we see the switch into the Drifblim. Drifblim can tank even a boosted Shadow Rage Fist pretty comfortably. We will see the shield just trying to preserve as much HP as possible, but I think an immediate switch into the Drifblim probably would have served a little bit better, as now that Marowak is way lower than it would have been if we just saw an immediate switch out. In comes the Clodsire. The fact that they're sending it in means they're guaranteed to be on Stone Edge. Honestly, I don't mind the idea of Drifblim actually going down 2 shields here, just because the ability to apply a lot of Icy Wind debuffs mean that Stone Edge is so non-threatening. Opponent gives an entire free Astonish. We do see a no shield. I really wouldn't mind a shield here. I mean, of course, they are going to have Stone Edge. They brought it into a Drifblim, but if you shield and apply a second debuff, then you are very comfortably tanking a -2 Stone Edge. If they switch out, you can Icy Wind whatever they send in, so even if it's something that's tough for you, at the very least, it's debuffed. Here, the Stone Edge is going to land. It's still survivable, but you don't have a ton of HP remaining. And now we're going to see a nice overfarm by the Drifblim. If this doesn't KO, I wouldn't mind seeing an aggressive switch out. This Icy Wind, will it be shielded? No, and it KOs. In comes Feraligatr, and you just debuff it, and then you can either send in the Marowak to get fast move pressure, or bring in the Dugong just to apply a little bit of extra debuffs. So the Icy Wind is applied, in comes the Dugong, and the opponent immediately does not want to play anymore. We now move to the final match, Battle 5 of Set 2, and it's the Dream Lead Shadow Marowak versus Shadow Drapion. Bonus safe switches to Malamar. You can outpace here if you throw Bone Club instantly. You'd get the Bone Club before they make the foul play. Opponent throws the foul play instantly, and that is a misplay, as it does give 2 free turns to the Marowak because of when they threw. The foul play is going to land. That does substantial damage. Now going to look to fire off the Bone Club. Bone Club, not going to threaten a knockout here. It does do some okay damage. We are now going to see a switch into Dugong. This is a bit of an interesting play, as Dugong is probably going to look for a 1 shield, an overfarm, and then picking up the knockout with the Icy Wind. As of course, Superpower, it doesn't knock out, but it does a ton of damage, and we will see the shield as the opponent will go for the Superpower. And now, as Dugong, you can overfarm a solid amount, but unfortunately letting the Malamar get to another move. My guess is it's a miscount from our battler, but even at -1, a Superpower does a lot of damage that you did not want to take. And there is a switch out. The opponent going to send in a Azumarill. Azumarill now going to be hit with back-to-back drill runs. But from what was a very good lead to start with, it honestly feels like things have a little bit gotten off the rails, where now the Azumarill is charging up a bunch of energy. They can honestly look to farm to 100 energy and then go for an Ice Beam, because they're very unthreatened by these drill runs that are landing. So if you're the opponent here, you have a lot of flexibility with how you play this out. The opponent, looks like there may be some lag here. Oh, they actually concede. I don't know why they conceded. They didn't know the back line, but if they did, they were actually in a pretty good position to win that game. All in all, we did see some common themes throughout the course of these battles. First off, in this elo range, you're going to have opponents who are going to make quite a lot of mistakes, as battlers in this elo range are people who are working to improve, and as you work to do that, obviously mistakes will happen along the way. So one big thing that can help you improve is going to be able to punish and take advantage of those misplays. Even in completely won endgames, we saw opponents not be able to convert it. So that's something that can be a very big advantage, is learning how to identify those win conditions while the match is going on and being able to execute on them and avoid playing into potential lose cons. Additionally, I think another big theme throughout is knowing damage values. As you play more and more of Go Battle League and you play against a lot of the same Pokemon, you're going to start to learn how much damage certain moves do. And knowing that and knowing the matchups, like what shield scenarios you win, can be very helpful as it allows you to play in an optimal manner. So that way you're not accidentally playing to a shield scenario that you do not win. So overall, obviously, having clean mechanics, good charge attack timing, counting, stuff like that is going to be helpful. But I think these are some of the important lessons that people can take away from trainers who are stuck in veteran and are looking to take that next step to get to expert. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoy content like this, consider leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the More Sliced Henry channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I've been Home Slice Henry.